Okay, we're live on StreamYard, and let's check Instagram.
I was going to say, I think Instagram abandoned me.
It takes a minute. I don't know what it is. Now it's going for me.
I love it.
Okay, go live.
I'm going to try again because it did not decide to do this. 1 second.
Good morning, everyone. We are doing some technical stuff. Crystalline is joining to Instagram. So
we're trying to make ourselves as accessible as possible.
Yes, we are.
And we are in Mercury pre-shadow. So obviously that's going wonderfully. Let me just get my little stream key here because I need to. It says I'm live. It's lying. So I'm going to really quickly do something here. And then I promise I will be with everybody in just a second. I don't like that. I feel like I'm ignoring everyone.
Oh, I'm ignoring everyone to get them another pillow. This is exciting. If anyone's in here, please talk to us in the chat.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to be able to make my Instagram work. Wait. Okay, we are good. Ha! All I had to do was lose faith in it so it would feel challenged. It's good. Okay. So I'm all set now. I'm happy. We're good.
Me too. I got another pillow.
Yeah. Okay. So hi, everybody. This is Ask Me Astros Monday Coffee Chat. We do this every Monday on YouTube and Instagram Live, where we go simultaneously live. So you can comment on either one. I see Bronwyn Joe has joined on Instagram, as well as Rock Tops by Kimmy. Hi. So we are going to be here talking about the eclipse, talking about a little bit about conditions for the year. And we do this every Monday, with one of the Mondays of the month being a very special broadcast where we actually look at an anonymous chart submitted by one of you for a particular question specific to that chart about astrology. So you can actually submit your question at askmeastros.com and we will consider it for the live broadcast, which should be coming up soon. We usually do it around the turning of a sign, but that was last week and I was in Egypt, so I threw us off. That's my fault. By the way, I'm Crystalline Sophia, and this is Vivi Henriette. We did such a good job. Woohoo! Good morning.
Woo, we are doing it. And hello, Hope with Facts. Oh,
yeah, that's Angela. Angela is amazing.
I love that. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. What should we jump? Well, let's jump in. So you were in Egypt.
I was in Egypt, and I'm still severely jet lagged. I apologize.
You're severely jet lagged. I think I came into my kitchen yesterday, the kitchen that I share. I have a sublet here with my flatmate, and I was like, why am I so I'm like, this eclipse is making me so weepy. Like, I feel okay, but I'm just like weepy. And they were like, oh, because both rulers are in Pisces. And suddenly I was like, oh, is everyone else having like a weepy, exhausted eclipse experience too?
I have been having it happened in my 12th house, exactly opposite my natal Venus, who is very detriment in Aries.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was on the 5th degree, and so is my Venus. And so I was expecting like potential health issue or, mental health breakdown. And I did, in fact, on Friday have a heck of a meltdown, but that was from being awake for 48 hours straight and traveling across the meridian and, simply being the neurodivergent person I am, who is very tired. So I don't really credit that to the eclipse as much, but I think because the eclipse was just so glancing, which is the best word I can think of for it. I woke up last night to look at it and just to be like, I've witnessed the eclipse. I was there and I saw it and I got to appreciate it. And it was like, that's a full moon. That is a full moon. That there might be a little shadow, like someone took a little nibble out of a cookie or something, but that to me looked like a full moon, which is great though, because lunar eclipses have a greater effect on the people of a nation or on people in general. So for this one to be very, very minorly occluded means that the effect on people will actually not be as strong. So where an eclipse would normally, according to Picatrix, destroy everything and recompose it, that destruction may be a lot more mild this time, which would maybe just show up in the form of being a little weepy.
I'll take it. It wasn't even feeling bad. It was just like, I'm just emoting, like,
Mhm.
maybe
I'm
hormonal.
honoring my feelings. I'm standing in them and holding them, and it is what
Yeah,
it
like,
is.
there's nothing even wrong. I'm just weepy.
Mhm.
2 things to that. 1, um, but the baleful rays, as Gabe said. I
Well, that's why I sent the picture to the group chat this morning. I was like, "Guys, I don't think we have to worry about the baleful rays this time."
you're making me a little nervous. It's like, you're like, "Oh, no, no, this eclipse, we're cool, we're cool." And it's like delayed reaction here. Also, let's hope I was, um, popping popping about, peeking into
Mm,
the Aries ingress chart yesterday,
yeah.
and, I was watching some commentary by Larry Arrington, and, I don't know, I feel like I'm hoping, like, I don't like the moon. I know it's complicated, but I don't like it. I don't
I
like it. We'll get
That's
into
the one
it.
I was looking at too. When I did a 45-minute video on the Aries ingress, and I had Larry go over what I thought with me first to make sure that
Uh-huh.
I had Larry, and I think I also got some of it approved by our wonderful Gabe. So I do have peer review for it, which I really appreciate. Um, oh, hi, Dan. Sorry, Dan's watching on Instagram. Love
Yeah.
you. Um, that Aries ingress moon, just, one of the things Larry brought up with me was, the people's thoughts and the people's focus is on the position of the king, the 10th house, but also that the sun, which was the ruler of the 10th house, but also the significator of the king, is in the 6th, and the moon kind of adding to that. If you think about the moon as a quality of mind or mentality,
Yeah.
when we think about the 6th being health and firmness or infirmity in another case, the fact that the people are concerned about the mental infirmity of both of our options for leadership by the end of this year really stuck out to me. Um,
Absolutely. So before I hop in there,
mhm.
should we open with letting people know, for those who are watching, what an Aries ingress chart is?
Should
I know
I
we
bring up the Aries ingress chart and we can look at it together?
yeah.
Yeah, let me pop that in right now. Not 2023. I don't even know what year it is, so you got to bear with me.
Okay, I've
Uh,
been having such bad memory loss, and that makes me hopeful because I could also I've never been able to memorize the year. It's
Yeah, I don't know how old I am anymore. I just know my perfection year and I just go with
Mhm,
that.
mhm.
So I'm going to share my screen here. I'm going to bring up Luna, hit share, and then if you can bring the Luna chart into the broadcast, this is our lovely Aries ingress chart that we're looking at. This is for Washington, D.C. It says Henrico County there. It's the same when I put it to Washington.
Mhm.
And in fact, what I'll try to do here is update it, which you can do right over here and go Washington, D.C., cast the chart, and just making sure I pop it forward a couple minutes to get the sun into Aries. There we go. This is our official Aries ingress for Washington, D.C., which we are using as the sort of proxy of the nation since it is our capital.
Mhm.
One caveat I will say is that if you really want to know what's going on where you are and how you're going to be affected, do it for the capital of your state,
Yeah.
perhaps. But this is for the nation, or as Gabe sort of rightly put it, sort of our empire, our collection of little self-governed areas. Um,
Mm.
so this is for Washington, D.C. And as you can see, we have our Scorpio rising. And when you do all of the criteria for who the Lord of the Year would be,
Yeah.
several of us did agree that it seems like Mars is the primary candidate for that. So we do have this Mars ruled year that we're going into.
Is
And what
that
you and
because,
I are focusing
can
on.
I pop in there? Is that because, one of the criteria is because Mars is angular and Mars is the ruler of the ascendant, among other things?
Yeah, so those are the biggest things. What we've got, because there were, you might have them pass off to the luminaries,
Uh-huh.
because the luminary here, like if you look at the MC, the moon is so far away from
Yeah.
the MC, it's not applying. The MC is actually separating from the moon. It kind of disqualifies that. If we thought about more of a quadrant house system, which they may have used more of an equal sign system, that would make the 10th house start here at Leo and then go forward. So the moon actually would be ninth house instead of 10th, as it is in whole sign.
Yeah.
So we took that into consideration just in case. Jupiter was another contender, and we were like stoked, hoping it would be Jupiter, because Jupiter is, of course, right on the DC. However, Jupiter is falling away from the descendant. The descendant will continue to move forward throughout the day. and Jupiter is not going to be able to have that. Mars, however, is in application with the IC. So that is potential energy still building. And so that's what we were looking at as Mars being not only the ruler of the chart, but the most significantly angular, even though it is the third strongest angle that it could be. Actually, I would say the fourth strongest angle that it could be, which lessens the intensity of Mars a little bit. So we kind of take what we can get with that one. Yeah.
Thank you for that clarification. But Mars does have a really powerful job to do nonetheless, because it is the ascendant ruler.
Yeah, Mars will be a significator of the people regardless, because he is the ruler of the first house of the people, along with the moon. So these two are the ones we're looking at. And of course, by sign, they are in opposition to each other.
Yeah. Which could we say on one level, like a people divided?
Oh yeah, people divided and everyone feeling attacked based on their ideologies is kind of what I figured, because you have Mars and Aquarius. So we're all kind of deciding, what do I believe, what's important to me, and how okay am I with what other people believe, which we see already. Like the problem with this chart, which is actually not really a problem, is it's not very impressive, because it's not a very big like aha moment. It's saying all the things we already know, that this is an election year. People are really trying to decide what justice looks like for them and what fairness or, equity looks like for them. And they're kind of lashing out at each other about it. So.
But I guess the part we were talking about earlier was the fact that the sun, being the representative of leaders or kings, right, is the ruler of that, of the moon, right? And so I don't know. My first thought was something of like, even though we could tell that the ruler is on the mind of the people, there's something it's something, I don't know, maybe I'm being a total bummer, but I saw that and I was like, oh, the people are somehow like, yoked to this ruler in this way, right? Like in the power of, and I just don't like it.
Yeah, I can agree with you there. The one thing that I like is that the moon is separating from this trine with the sun. So at least the people are moving forward regardless of that, but it is still the most recent aspect that the moon has. I think the next aspect the moon makes officially is to Jupiter, another kind of judge's ruler indicator. So that had me thinking that we might be looking at more situations where we're wondering about what judges say about things, for as far as like our own freedoms go, or who gets to be the leader for us, as we are already seeing. So again, just more of what we're already experiencing, but just knowing that they are big deals, and we might be seeing more of the checks and balances really having to come in clutch here.
And building on, we have this, obviously the nodes are baked into this chart because they live somewhere. How do you think about like this eclipse that we're having an eclipse now, right? And which is a lunar eclipse. So we could say, as you mentioned earlier, that it could be traditionally was said to have a more of an effect over the people, whereas the solar eclipse we're about to have April 8th is going to affect leadership, loosely speaking, right? But there's like a delayed, right? There's that like delayed eclipse reaction. I don't know the best way to put that.
The timing of it?
Yes. Yeah. So how are we thinking about that timing in the ingress chart?
Yeah. So I'm going to bring up this. I should just bring up both of them. But one of the things I have, and I'm wondering if this is okay, cool. So on my Patreon last week, I did a whole breakdown of the timing with the eclipse chart and everything like that. And so when I did the math, which is not my strong suit, but I got it checked by people who are good at math. It does translate that this lunar eclipse, because of its duration from beginning to end, was about 4 hours and 39 minutes, which gives us 4.65 months. Because it's a lunar eclipse, we go by months per hour of the actual eclipse. So 4.65 months of significance of this eclipse actually doing what it does, but that doesn't mean that it starts today. It could start later. And in fact, based on where the moon is in the chart, since we see the moon being in the middle section of the chart up there, that tells us that it's going to start in roughly the middle section of that 4 points, or of the year from the eclipse. So this is all based on Ptolemy's Tetrabiblos. And so long story short, when you go into the, like, it's going to take place this far from when the eclipse happens, but the intensification of it will happen at this point in the 4 months that start this far from when the eclipse happens. What we see is it all breaks down into happening around, let's see, let me get here, somewhere between August and November is the period of the eclipse actually having its fulfillment of what it's going to happen. So right now, by transit, this eclipse is affecting some people, right? People are receiving a transit that is an eclipse. So we may see some headlines that are like, oh, this person. And if we see this person is affected by the eclipse, I would look at that person's chart and see how the eclipse affects them. That's my curiosity right now. But when I do the math according to Ptolemy, the beginning of this eclipse is actually in August and it will last through November, with the intensification happening in September or early October, just in time for the next round of eclipses and to carry us into, of course, election time, when Mars will be getting ready for retrograde and will be opposing Pluto, I believe. So there's a lot of stuff that's happening around that very important time of year for us as well.
And of course, Mars is going retrograde it starts in Leo, goes back to Cancer, right? So I'm now thinking that moon was early degrees, right? So it's going to hit that.
Yeah.
It's going to get that moon.
Yeah, it's gonna be pretty close to that moon. So I can actually pop right back over here really quickly. It's gonna give us Henrico, but we just saw earlier that it's the same setup. So the moon's at 3 degrees. And if we wanted to look at it, I think it should let me do this, where if I come here and I go to Event Navigator and give us direction changes, Mars goes retrograde on the 6th, and we can see that Mars stations retrograde at 6 degrees. So very close to that moon, and will of course recover over where the moon is in the Aries Ingress chart, which is right here.
I'm pinning that for a future AMA conversation all about the Mars retrograde. I don't want to like hop in there now, although it's very tempting. Yeah. Okay. So this chart is a lot. It's a lot to take in if you've never seen it. Welcome.
Yeah. So Sarah, to your question of would this be extra intensified with the energy of the eclipses that would be happening in September then too, kind of like a domino effect? That depends. Like we said, how this eclipse is actually delayed in significance to August. We would have to look at when that eclipse happened. If the eclipse is rising, then yes, they will compound on each other, because that eclipse's significations will happen almost immediately, or at least in the first quarter of the year from that eclipse. So that's something I have not looked at yet, because I'm really diving into our April 8th eclipse next.
We have some more comments in the bigger chat.
Sorry?
We have some more comments in the bigger chat.
Yeah.
Devin says, let's go through the Mars conjunct Uranus and Algol first, then the Mars RX.
Yeah, then Mars opposite Pluto, then Mars RX, activating the moon of the year for the US. Yeah, Mars is not going quietly into that good night of being in Cancer during retrograde.
Okay, this is I'm going to present something that I've been like thinking about all week, and I'm going to it's going to be sloppy, Crystalline. So maybe hold space for me. If there's anyone who can help me untangle some thoughts, it's you. I've been thinking recently, what really made me think about this was one of the charts I was interested in looking at with you is let me get this right. I pulled up, there was a New York Times article that came out this week, right? Just in time for these eclipses. The headline is Gambia moves towards overturning landmark ban on female genital cutting. Okay. So fucked up. But in 2015, when they outlawed female genital cutting, it was the nodal reversal of this moment, right? Yeah. And so we were again once in the throes of a Mars Venus story.
Yes.
And I don't know why I've been like thinking about this way. I've been kind of trying to reimagine the way that we think about Mars and Venus. And is it like actually Mars the culprit, or is it like the culture? Like, is there like this is the problem Mars, or is the problem like a broken Mars? Because I was thinking about the mythological story, right? About Mars and Aries. Sorry, Mars, same person. excuse me, Mars and Venus being lovers, right? And if we think about
Mhm.
it too, right? Mars and Venus both are part of the night sect together, right? And so there is actually this like version of Mars and Venus that like gets together like really well. Like you think
Mhm.
of like the Marshal protecting the Venusian, and even thinking about, you know, if we think about them on sort of like signs, as like a continuum, right? Like there is almost this fact that like Venus needs the Marshal in a sense, right? Like I
Mhm.
think about something like, I don't know, like domestic violence came to mind, right? Like sort of personal experience, right? And
Yeah.
it's like the two pitted against each other. But what's it mean when like Venus can actually use Mars to, I'm just gendering for the archetype here, but like
Mhm.
when Venus can protect, um use sort of, it actually has access to the Marshal to protect herself, right? And so I'm just thinking about all these stories, and it's like, is it inherent, like thinking about the ways in which we speak about Mars, and is it inherently Mars that is always the cutting, the aggressor, the sort of like negative connotation, or is there a way that we think about like the way that, you know, Mars has been, you know, like a dysfunctional Mars acting out inappropriately, and just sort of getting into the nuances of that, because does that make sense?
Yeah, I think what we would have to look at there is like the conditions of them. If they were both really in good condition and in an optimistic aspect to each other, you would say, oh, Mars is defending Venus, or Venus is pacifying Mars, or something like that. Um, in this particular case, when we look at like, say, this chart, they're averse to each other. So
Yeah.
any influence they have, they're not seeing eye to eye. And so it's how is the character doing and how much can the characters communicate? And if they're communicating well, then yes, maybe they are supporting each other. And I would love to see more of that for sure.
Yeah, and I think I'm just, like, kinda going back to the core mythology, like, I was thinking
Mhm.
about that, like, what's really got me thinking was that story we've discussed before about Mars and Venus kind of, like, shacking up, like, Hephaestus is at work.
Yeah.
Hephaestus, you know, gets word, gets angry, builds a net, catches them both. It's this sort of brutal scene where, like, everyone from, like, Olympus is looking on and sort of shaming both of them,
Yeah.
but I was like, "Oh, it's interesting. Is it Mars and Venus that are the fact, or is it, like, these sort of outside circumstances?" So yes, getting to like the astrology itself, but also
Mhm.
just thinking about the grander narrative and the way that we talk about Mars and Venus.
Yeah. And to even think about that a little bit further, Venus was only with Hephaestus because she was promised to him,
Mhm.
whereas Mars was the choice.
Yeah.
Or, Aries was the choice. Aphrodite was with Hephaestus because there was a promise and a bargain made,
Mhm.
and she was with, Aries because of a choice that she made. And together, I think it was Eros that was their child, right? So you get this passion that comes from that. Um, so I think there's definitely a very strong argument to be made there.
Yeah, and just thinking about this idea of like Venus having access to Mars in these interesting ways. And I say all of this because thinking about, right, I've been having these conversations with Cameron Steele a lot, another really amazing astrologer, about how I think a lot of these Venus Mars issues are coming up during this
Mhm.
eclipse because obviously we're in the signs of Venus and Mars. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, and I was curious to look at some charts with you if you're interested.
Yeah, do you have them? Which
I
ones do you
do.
like?
Can I actually, are you on your phone? Can I text you a chart because my
Yeah.
my Astro Gold pooped out this week.
Oh, no.
I need to start doing Luna. It's just this computer. If you want to know, I'm having some retrograde issues myself. My computer, my original computer broke before the retrograde, and now I'm like, fuck, do I get it like do I get it fixed? Um,
Ooh,
or
yeah,
do I
doing, like
wait? And now my old computer is now having issues with Astro Gold. So I think we're gonna go to Luna and just ride
mhm.
through it.
Yeah, I use Luna and I use astroseek.com. I was even electing talismans earlier today using AstroSeek. Luna is a lot nicer on the eyes, so I'll use Luna to look at something so I can make sense of it and then plug it into AstroSeek to check it, which is not ideal, but it's all I can do on a PC right now. I'm not a huge fan of Solar Fire, unfortunately. So,
Yeah. Okay. I texted you the chart if you want to put it in Luna if you don't
yeah,
mind.
let me see here.
By the way, Devin, I see you. If you're still in the chat, if you're still here, we have this really cool function now that we are on StreamYard. And so maybe one day you will make a surprise appearance with us.
So Mars 18, March 18, 2015, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay, 0315 2001 5, right? All right, and then you've got the time as
I just
midnight.
did noon because I don't know. Or did I do midnight?
It's midnight. It's 00.
Well, let's do noon.
Let's do noon. Okay, and that's in Banjul. Okay,
Mhm.
so we'll come over here.
That's
We'll
the
do-
capital I just chose. So
which is smart. Gambia. Chart. Okay, so this is what we're looking at for the noon chart in Banjul on the Ides of March, no less. The Ides of March 2015. Does this look right? Let me see. We have a 5 Sagittarius ascendant with a 4. No, this is not correct. What did I get wrong?
well, I don't know because the
It's not-
ascendant would be different. You don't have to look at the ascendant in my chart because remember I did midnight, so ignore that.
Yeah, but I still wanted to make sure I was doing the same as yours to start, and now I should have it because I was on the wrong day.
Okay.
Cast chart 318. Oh my goodness, why is it so different? Oh, that's right, because it's midnight versus
Yeah.
318:15. Okay, so we are on the right day.
Put this in half asleep last night, so stick with the noon chart. We're good.
Yeah, no, this is cool.
I haven't spent a lot of
All
time.
right. So we're not going to acknowledge any of the angles because we can't trust them because we don't have an exact time. For anybody who's watching, if you're doing house significations, it's not going to be as helpful. It may not be accurate. But we do have Venus in Taurus, which is interesting. That's the first thing that jumped out at me. And we have a domicile Mars and domicile Venus, but averse each other. And Mars very close to Uranus on the south node angle there. Holy cow. Yeah. So what
So we
kind
have
of things
both eclipse rulers strong.
Sorry?
Both eclipse rulers, both rulers
Yeah.
of the nodes, nodal rulers are strong.
Yeah, they are strong, but again, that aversion and Uranus kind of makes me a little bit nervous. And I'm also trying to think about the nature of the situation. So it was a government decision to make it illegal, right? This is the illegal. This is where it's in the favor of women not having to be in pain.
That's that's what I think is interesting. And now because of the religious movement, there's been a call to repeal this, right? And so that's what I thought it was interesting about the nodal reversal and thinking about like it's interesting. It almost feels like fractured, like two sides really thinking about that Venus and Mars, like two sides were able to like I'm curious to know what the well not that what's the opposite of a proponent? The people who are against this, right? Like I'm wondering if it was a really like parted decision, like thinking about both being really strong, but Venus coming through somehow.
Yeah.
And now that you see there's this sort of ripple again that's forcing it open.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at the support that either of them have. And it's funny because Jupiter's talking to both of them in this case by sign. We have Jupiter giving a trine to Mars, which you'd think would be more supportive than the square to Venus, but two benefics in aspect is pretty strong.
Yeah.
So that's something to be said. And then both sect-lights are talking to Venus, where it depending if it looks like earlier in the day, the moon may still have been in Aquarius, which would have been square to Venus and sextile to Mars. But I would say it's probably something that happened. I would hope something that happened afternoon to give that moon some oomph over for Venus there. And then Saturn being trine to Mars and averse to, we have a kind of a grand trine here with Saturn, Mars, and Jupiter, which is interesting as well. There's just a lot of like, if you're trying to see who's got the most points, they are kind of almost matched in some ways. I really wish we had an exact time for this.
Me too. Maybe we can keep digging. But it's interesting too to think about also the martial, this idea of like Mars acting as a protectorate, right? Like protector, right? Like because this is the other thing I was looking at in this chart, which I thought was fascinating, was look where Neptune is right now as they're starting to talk about abolishing it. Right? Like right over that sun in that chart.
Yep. Yeah. At the exalted degree of Venus, by the way. Yeah. 27 Pisces is Venus's exaltation exact degree. So, yeah.
I am. It's come up in discussion. I think I think I shared the article with you. This isn't something I've researched too much. It doesn't look like they've passed anything thus far, but I thought it was an interesting thing to think about, right? And maybe this is a good conversation to kind of mention to people who are curious why the fact that this is a nodal reversal would be significant,
Mhm.
right? That's the first thing that I was thinking about when I saw the date was like, let me pull this up. I bet it's part of this nodal story.
Yeah, so what we're looking at here is we have the South Node in Aries and the North Node in Venus. Today, what we have is the exact opposite. The North Node, I put the North Node in Venus, sorry, the North
Mhm.
Node in Libra in this original chart. We
Yeah.
have the North Node currently in Aries and the South Node in Libra. So this is a halfway of the cycle, kind of like the full moon of what began at this time. So the culmination of that energy.
Yeah. It's interesting too, thinking about the south node. I know that it's far away, but the
Mhm.
south node is like a depletion, right? And so like
Yeah.
depleting that Mars, like it's a very
Yeah. I
strong
think
Mars, but still like
Devin said the same thing, yeah, that the South Node is kind of cutting away Mars's ability. Now, astrologers in ancient times are very conflicted about, are the nodes always malefic, or is it just the South Node that's malefic? If a malefic is with the South Node, is that malefic, or is it diminishing the malefic? So then kind of better because it's taking away the strength of the malefic, or is it just making it more malefic and chaotic? But in this case, for this story, it seems like we have a case for the South Node detracting from the malefic,
Mhm.
unless it would have been even more protective uh, in the first place. But I think it's really interesting to see how, for something that is such a religious choice, that we had this rebelliousness, this turning
Mhm.
away from the tradition that we get from the Mars Uranus. That would have, again, this is something that is Mars had already had the conjunction with Uranus in this case and was separating from that. So that choice was probably something that was happening before the official vote made it real. And they decided to veer away from tradition and religion in this particular scenario. I wonder if that's another factor.
And it's interesting too, because we would also, if we're thinking about like tradition and religion and courts, we look to Jupiter as well,
Hmm.
right? To see
Yeah.
what Jupiter's doing in this chart.
And Jupiter is retrograde. Um, and applying to, well, separating from, because retrograde. So separating from what had been a trine with Mars, which may have been around the same time when we consider the speeds of the planets.
Uh-huh.
That conjunction may have been roughly around the same time as the trine. So another thing of courts working in favor of a, radical change.
Interesting thing too, right? Like Jupiter retrograde, going back to review something that has been
Mhm.
long standing to actually like um to put a ban in place is
Yeah.
interesting as well. And just thinking about that Venus in Taurus, right? Like I think of Venus in Taurus holding her own, like she just made it there and like the home of thing like the home of like the senses, things that
Mhm.
look good, and like literally what we're fighting against is like this ability for people to, hold on to their sense of feeling, right? Like this
Mhm.
idea of
Yeah.
like genital mutilation so people can like lose um be denied a certain feeling in their
Yeah.
body, right? Ability. So that's sort
Yeah.
of fascinating.
Mhm. And mortal and wild, I just want to point out we actually can't take the angles seriously in this chart because this is not an exact time. So while that's a really cool delineation of if this time is accurate, we don't know.
Yeah.
But it is a cool thought if it did happen around noon on this day.
Yeah. If anyone wants to dig into this more, like
Mhm.
I'm saying message us. I'd love to keep up with this and see what goes on
Yeah. It
from
is
time.
interesting though, again, the Mars conjunct Neptune is there. It's separating by a very little bit. Um, And I like what Devin is saying about evening star Venus. That's a really good point to think about her phase and Mars also being evening star. So they're stronger bisect even in that way. Um, but
Oh, and they
the
love working together
conjunction,
as a big star, right? There is something it's
yeah.
interesting that even though they can't see each other, the ways in which we think about, like, them essentially working together.
Mhm. Yeah, and honestly, texts actually make Venus more battle ready as a morning star. But still, it's something that she is more in her power as an evening star. She prefers to be.
Mhm.
So she actually, maybe not battle ready, but actually divine feminine appreciation, actually getting recognized at this time. And Mars also being of that same persuasion. So that could be something that tips it towards, we're kind of feeling the same inclination here. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for going over this chart. This is, by the way, if anyone now I'm looking at the comments because I can see them.
Mhm.
If anyone has, like, an astrology question that they've been thinking about this week, bring it to us.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah,
just
more general astrology questions about the week and things in general. If you have a question about your chart, you can actually submit that to askmeastros.com and we might be able to do a full episode on it. So there is the opportunity.
absolutely. And Devin's saying my 8th house sun keeps my Mars ability to cut. No, wait, and hold on.
The eighth
Oh,
house sun keeps them off the camera when you were
yeah.
inviting them.
I'm like, I just read 2 things at once. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if you ever decide to join us, Devin, we can keep your camera off. It can be like the radio. Like when people
Yeah.
call in, I love that so much. We can have call-in guests.
You can do a little jingle.
Yes, I love this new technology. What astro-wise, what else has been on your mind, Crystalline? You did your 45-minute Aries ingress video.
I was so proud of it. And I did one for the lunar eclipse as well. Next, I'm looking forward to the solar eclipse because there's just a lot going on with that. But even when you look at the transits between now and then, it's all Venus. Venus is the only planet that's perfecting transits between today and the solar eclipse, which I find fascinating. Mercury is going to go retrograde on the April 1st, which also is really funny to me because of all people, Mercury, the trickster, goes retrograde on April 1st, which is totally arbitrary. I find that really interesting, but
Is it arbitrary?
no, it's divine comedy. Yeah, so we have Venus going into Aries just in time for that Aries eclipse. So it's going to be interesting to me that Venus will be in the sign of the eclipse while Mars at that point is still, I think, in Pisces. So
Do you want to pull up that chart for the
Aries eclipse?
Yeah.
Sure can.
Okay.
So we go to cycles, going to pop over to April 8th. And I'm going to make it Washington, D.C. so we can be super efficient and effective. I might have to bump the minutes a little bit. Okay. So 1924. Okay, cool. So here's our solar eclipse happening in Aries. There's a lot happening at that time.
Oh,
yeah.
Go. Yeah.
Yeah. Look at everybody.
Okay.
Well, okay. So as someone who typically doesn't look at asteroids and things unless there's a reason to, one thing that I can't help but notice is 1924 for the moon, 1924 for the sun, 1924 for Chiron. That's pretty interesting to me. Yeah. And you can tell it's going to be a total eclipse because of how close it is to the North Node. So everybody who's going to be in the path of totality, which is going to be me by force because I will find my way there. It's going to be interesting. The other fascinating thing that you can't see on a chart is that because the sun is going to be eclipsed, there will be made visible an entire comet the size of Mount Everest that is spewing volcanic stuff out of it like devil horns. So it has been dubbed the Devil Comet that will be visible because of the eclipse on this day. And I don't think even Ptolemy saw that coming.
Before we dive into this chart, okay, so I think astrologers are divided. Look at the eclipse, don't look at the eclipse, have some eclipse protocols where you stay in. You're chasing this eclipse.
I'm chasing the eclipse.
Do you do magic on eclipse? I don't think you like.
No.
What's your eclipse protocol? Tell me your feeling about all these things.
I'm going to chase the eclipse the same way I would chase a tornado, and I have chased tornadoes. I'm not going after the tornado to harness its power and claim that I'm as powerful as a tornado. I'm going to witness God and nature in action and to appreciate the majesty of it.
Okay.
I have no intentions that I'm setting for the eclipse. I just want to be there and witness it so that I can have that sort of divine connection moment with the universe, with nature, with God, and just be like, this is bigger than me. And I like that. So that's one thing that I'm going to be really interested in.
Okay, fair enough. I can appreciate that stance. I mean, I can appreciate anyone's stance, but
yeah, I'm not I will make a movie like Twister. They're coming out with the second Twister, by the way. And in the second Twister, they're wearing the t-shirts for the same company that we went with to chase our tornado. And the guy, of course, was named Bill. And he was awesome. So
I never saw that movie. Was it just like they just chase tornadoes? Is that what's happened? Is that the premise of this film?
Yeah. And then there's like some character stuff going on at the same time, but mostly it's like, how can we make tornadoes? It's just how can we make tornadoes a big deal? So,
I mean, wasn't there like the Wizard of Oz? That was pretty.
That was a magic tornado, a little bit different. This is actually like attempting research with tornadoes and, people falling in love and out of love and getting back together, because you can't have a movie without that. So,
Whatever. I feel like I'm gonna keep it The Wizard of Oz. That's the only tornado film I need in my life.
right.
Um, or your stories I will take.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, let's dive into this. Let's yeah.
Yeah, so this still requires some peer review, but I think a lot of it's pretty obvious when we yeah, thank you, Devin. That's exactly the part I was thinking too, and I always quote the food part. That's my favorite. Tara's son, naturally, so I'm always asking for food.
Oh, well,
But
this is a Twister reference, just so I'm
we're
getting it.
still quoting Twister. Yeah, it's very quotable, actually. It's quite found family in that way. But anyway, what we're looking at here is I'm very interested in the little triple thing we've got going on with these three. Mercury is still retrograde in Aries, coming back towards where the eclipse is. Venus is now detriment in Aries, whereas she was exalted for the lunar eclipse. So good for the people, right? Venus is set up. The eclipse was very minimal occlusion. It seems like the people get a pass a bit on this one.
People get
But the leadership, however, maybe not so as much with this eclipse. And I believe I haven't gotten the exact amount of the eclipse, because it's solar, the effects of it will last years. So for every hour the eclipse lasts, that's as many years we're going to see this effect go off.
okay.
And it will have the same kind of thing, because it's for Washington, D.C. in the top part of the chart. We're going to push it out a couple months before the effects actually start. So again, we're making some significations likely coming up right around the time of elections, I would say. Just as a baseline, I will be doing the math much more particularly and better, and getting, again, all of my math checked. But just as a glancing at it, like, this shows that we've got some stuff going on for leadership in America taking place probably at the end of the summer and into fall.
Wow.
If I
And
get my
let's
math
like
right. Yeah.
I love, by the way, this is like happening on my midheaven.
Yeah. And to Devin's point here, Venus is just under the beam. She's having her set, and Venus was the significator of the October eclipse. So she is actually showing the decrease in the events of the October solar eclipse that happened. So that one is now phasing out a little bit, just as this one is getting ready to give birth to its own significations. It's another thing I'm going to be talking about, is Venus being at that phasis moment.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you make of I'm like staring very like um mm, God, it's like thinking about Venus in Aries, but being ruled by that Mars, that just Mars Saturn just feels a little like a
Yeah. And that's
uh,
applying as well. I'm also concerned about Venus and Aries ruling the Jupiter Uranus conjunction. So it just seems like things are about to get unpredictable, and they're probably going to be changing in ways that change a lot. There's going to be a lot of blurred lines that need to be redrawn, and then, to put it magically, consecrated, like
yeah.
actually made real. Looking at that Venus, or that Saturn Mars, saying like Saturn is trying to put lines on things that don't have lines. So Saturn is trying to say, I'm going to put a rule on this where there wasn't necessarily a rule before. And Mars is bringing in this really quick, sharp energy to that as well. And then we have sort of the potential for rebellion to that going on with the Jupiter Uranus. There's a lot happening in this chart. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the Saturn Mars feels almost like, whenever I see that, like tumultuous to me. I think of, like, as you mentioned, like Saturn trying to hold the line, or Saturn being a structure, and Mars simultaneously trying to like break that structure. Like, it feels like a very like tug of war, like coming into birth moment.
Yeah, yeah. And Sarah, while I'm talking about timing, that's mundane astrology. For a natal chart, if you're looking at what does this eclipse mean for me, treat it like a transit. So see how it
Mhm.
relates to your chart. But for the eclipse and what it is doing as its own little event, and it's the timing of that, then I look to Ptolemy currently to see when that will unfold. Hope that helps. So yeah, there's just so much to look at. All of the big pivotal moments that we've been anticipating for 2024 seem to be happening kind of at the same time.
Yeah, it's interesting thinking about that. I mean, it's a well, sorry, it's a sextile, but it rules it that Jupiter, thinking about Jupiter coming in again with like courts, laws, things like that, but then ruling that Saturn Mars, it does feel like there's going to be some like, are you feeling that as well? Are you reading that as well? Like
The courts?
yeah, and this sort of being re-emphasized in this eclipse
Yeah.
chart, like
Yeah. So thinking about how the courts were kind of the seventh house adversary of
yeah.
the Aries ingress chart,
Mhm.
and now they're up with the MC. It's
Mhm.
interesting to me that like maybe there's some court decisions that come around that become prominent and make changes that are either 180s, unexpected, or throw off entirely something that was happening. Um, and I can see it again when we see that the Saturn and Jupiter, they're separating from it.
Yeah.
But there is that sextile aspect between these two little chaotic gremlins. And so that's something to keep in mind, that they are talking to each other right now. And so it's just wobbly all around.
If you think about Jupiter, right? It's having jurisdiction over Pisces, right? Like you
Mhm.
think of like I liked how you called them. Did you say chaotic gremlins?
I did. And
Like
I'm
they're
not
both
sorry.
like chaotic gremlins. If we do that by extension, like chaotic
Yeah.
gremlins in the court, like having to deal with
Mhm.
some really messy stuff, which
Yeah.
yeah.
Or, people prolonging things or coming up with
Yeah.
what we may feel is like really irrational reaches to make something delay or to work around or find a loophole or whatever. And who knows if they actually will be able to do it, because we have all of this instability going on.
Mm. Something to keep in mind too, if I'm getting this right, do not uh not made mundane astrology a study, which is why this is so much fun getting to like talk about this with you.
Mhm.
When we looked at the Aries ingress chart and we pulled the chart for DC because that's we live in the United States and that's our
Mhm.
capital. But it's interesting to remember that that Aries ingress chart itself,
Mhm.
the rising is going to change throughout the world, but
Everybody.
it's going to be
Yeah.
the same chart. So, so
Oh
the
my God.
so the
Sorry.
significations of like Venus and Mars, thinking about the ways they show up in that Aries ingress and then how they show up in these eclipse charts, right? We can even start to think about how that's going to affect a country like Gambia and that
Mhm.
some of those topics we discussed earlier.
So that's an amazing point, and I'm gonna show something here when I pop over to cycles and I go into 2024 and I get to just glance at this. We have
Mhm.
this, as we said before, Scorpio rising ruled by Mars on the angle, but I
Yeah.
couldn't sleep on the night train in Egypt last week. And so I was
Yeah.
like, we're coming into the ingress. Let me see how Egypt's going to do. So I can tell our guide what's going on, because he was very interested in all of
Yeah.
our magical stuff that we were doing, which was amazing. If you're traveling to Egypt and you have the opportunity to choose who guides you, I highly recommend Hani Mostafa.
Okay.
Amazing, amazing person. So you can see Scorpio rising, ruled by Mars, chaos kind of all over the place. This same chart, though, the planets
Mhm.
being in the same position, if I go to, let's say, Cairo,
Yeah.
Egypt, and then give me a moment while I make sure I get the sun in the right place. Um, Hang on. We'll just take the sun here, and it's going to change it to me, though. Hang on. Sorry, I have to, because it's going to force it back to being um, in my city because of the settings of this program. I have to
Mhm.
pop forward as much as I can. Here we go. So we have roughly that. Um, the way it was, and it's not showing up this way now, because it was like 5 something a.m. was the actual time. So,
Okay.
again, I'd have to pop back in minutes. But the point of it is, and I'll get it back there as soon as I can, when this happened, when it was 00, and you can already see it going. So that's good. It was Venus conjunct by like separation of 1 degree, the ascendant. So that's what we're going to end up with, I promise. And it's going to take me a while. But the fact that they have Venus in exaltation conjunct the ascendant, and I think they were applying,
Yeah.
is like the ideal. That's what you want, man. And even the ascendant ends up between Saturn and Venus. So you get that added benefit of, by a quadrant system, here, this will do. By a
Yeah.
quadrant system, you have Saturn in a separate house. So Venus is rising, Saturn is not yet. It kind of separates them and pushes Saturn to the side and says, hang on, you later. Um, and so they had all this stuff that seemed really optimistic. And I was like, oh
Yeah.
man, why couldn't we get exalted Venus on the ascendant as the Lord of our year? Like,
Because
dang.
we haven't earned it.
Yeah. Well, and so later that week, I was talking to Hani and I was like, hey, glancing, right? I don't have all my textbooks with
Yeah.
me, I don't have all my sources with me. But he had been talking about the economy and how they were
Yeah.
really focused on the crazy inflation that's been going on in Egypt right now and how that's been a struggle for them. And I said, well, based on what I saw, it looks like you might actually have a better year for that. Because if you look at the ruler of the first house, which represents the people, and the ruler of the midheaven, which
Yeah.
represents the king, they're both Jupiter, who's in the third
Mhm.
house of Taurus. Um, and that's focused on, sort of diplomatic relations and connections with things. And the sun, of course, the king, is focused on finances. So it seems like the president is very focused on recovering that economy. And I had asked, like, do you guys kind of like your president? Are you in line with him because they have the same significator? And he said, we used to
Yeah.
be, but then the economy got out of whack and everybody's having problems with him now. And so it seems like he's been focusing to get his appeal back on the economy, and they will be focusing. So I asked, do you have like relations with other countries that might be helping you with treaties or trade deals or something like that
Yeah.
to get this fixed? And he was like, oh yeah, 2 weeks ago it just started. So I was able to tell him, based on the chart, it does look like that will get better. And so they have a very optimistic year ahead of them. The only thing that I would look at here is, the condition of workers, because the people signification, the secondary signification of the moon, is in the sixth. I'm wondering about work conditions potentially, but again, that's hopefully going to be something that they improve upon because it is ruled by the sun, exalted. So maybe workers get better pay, something like that.
Well, this is fun. Now we get to have another chart that we can kind of keep up with throughout the year.
Mhm.
I just I'm rooting for Egypt, like
Say hi
especially
to
because
Honey.
it's a rough year everywhere, and as as we go through the
Yeah.
tumult, we can pull up this chart.
I'm very thrilled to say, hey, everybody, it's not bad everywhere. Look, we have a great looking chart here. And again, same exact planets, different time of day when we have the ingress. So it's just a matter of where you are and what's going on for that place. So,
Isn't and that too, like with electional astrology, right? There's like the uh someone near and dear to me says they put a Jupiter on it, the put a the put a bird on it, right? It's like put
mhm.
Venus or Jupiter on in the first or the 10th if you're like struggling. Just
Yeah.
right. Like that's kind of the like fix all. Something to remember. I mean, of course, not completely, but
Mhm. Yep. Hello back to Guiding Tarot on Instagram. I see you.
I'm grabbing a tissue.
Hi, Caitlin. There we go. Yeah. So that was fun. Wow. It's already almost 11. So that's great.
Oh my God.
I'm going to pull us back over to the eclipse for today
Okay.
just to sort of round us out.
So Luna, can you not just do a
Let me
solar
go
return
here.
on this?
Yeah, you can do a solo return. I would have to go into somebody's chart, and then you get the options to do progressions, that kind of
Okay,
stuff.
that's why you were doing the Cairo thing by hand because you just didn't pull up the chart. You were just because you were doing just you wanted to look at the date and the location. Oh,
Yeah, I
I
could
see.
have gone into the charts and then Cairo ingress and stuff like that. But I have a lot of charts that you would have been able to see. So
Got it. Got it. Okay.
yeah, you're right though. I didn't think about it. I was in a rush.
No, no worries. I'm just curious about what this can do because again, I don't know what my
Mhm.
Astro Gold on my computer is just like.
Yeah, so if you go into charts, all of your saved charts end up in there, and it does have one thing I like about Luna too, and I'm gonna brag about Luna for a second, and yes, if you do want 10% off, I can get that for you, like, it's in my, link tree, but one thing I do like about Luna that's very convenient, and I can't wait for Luna to have more features that I can use it more
Mhm.
exclusively, but, the charts will also have a directory of famous people. So you don't have to have their charts saved separately. You can just go into the directory and find someone there. And they also do have 20,000 asteroids that you can add, which is very helpful if you're doing asteroid work.
That's wild. That's
Mhm.
to I'm asteroids overwhelm me. They're not gonna not overwhelm
Asteroids
me.
at this point, because they are overwhelming, I like to do it of like, do you have one in mind? Let's see if it's significant rather than doing the whole ephemeris of asteroids and finding the ones that might be significant. Um,
Yeah.
unless I have a lot of time, but my prep for client work is already an hour to 2 hours. So
Yeah. At, okay, this has been wonderful. I don't know if
Mhm.
wonderful is the word. It's been almost been delightful chatting charts with you. Let's exit full screen.
Illuminating.
Does we have a question? Okay. Let's see. I'm worried of being on my Jupiter square my nodes. Oh, okay, we do have one last question if we have time to answer it. Where is this eclipse in
Mhm.
the Saros cycle? Do you know the answer to that?
Not a clue. I'm not familiar with the Saros cycle. My nose is always buried in ancient texts. So
That's the Saros cycle that Bernadette Brady did a lot of work around that, right? Am I getting correct?
Mhm. Think
Okay.
so. Yeah, I'd have to.
That's my understanding because
So,
I
oh,
thought
so it's
Bernadette Brady.
the yeah.
So what the Saros cycle is, right? If I'm understanding, it's like looking at like much larger eclipse families where you can tie in eclipses, so then you can like get like
Yeah.
a history that spans like hundreds of years. I'm getting that's correct.
Mhm. Yeah, it looks like well, so the one I pulled up talks about the Saros cycle as a period of 18 years. So that's one eclipse cycle. It's a cycle of eclipses and governs the periodicity and recurrence of solar and lunar eclipses. When two eclipses are separated by a period of one Saros, they share a very similar geometry. So it's a period of 18 years. It's an eclipse cycle. So
Oh, but I
this
think when
is
people talk about the
halfway
larger
through the
cycle
Saros
though,
cycle. Yeah.
but I think when people talk about the larger Saros cycle, from my understanding though, they're usually speaking
Yeah.
of like bringing it into a context of like hundreds of years, right?
Yeah. I'm
There's
trying to
eclipse
find.
families.
Oh, it's 223 synodic months is something that I've got here, but that's 18 days or 18 years as well. So the only thing I'm pulling up right now is 18 years.
I'm gonna look this up.
Yeah. I would
Does
need to
any
do more research to understand. Um, but
I
if
know
it
there's
is,
something
as
that
I'm pulling
always
from here, we're halfway through a sorrow cycle of the Aries Libra.
okay, here we go.
Yeah.
I found something. Eclipses come in families. Um, okay.
Sarah, you just did a class on them. Do you want to pop an
Yeah.
answer in the chat and help us out?
Are you getting an
Because this is
answer?
a Chaldean thing. I'm surprised I haven't encountered it yet when I've been researching eclipses like insane.
Okay, we're waiting for Sarah. Okay.
Mhm.
Let's see. Let's see. The geometry of a Saros cycle. These families or cycles have beginnings, middles, and ends, and were first discovered by the Babylonians. Any one cycle will run for well over 1,000 years, making the study of individual eclipses equivalent to sitting and watching a giant hardwood tree grow. The tree may be involved in some activity, which, because our period of observation is so small compared to the life of the tree, would appear to be a random, unconnected event. However, if we sat there for 1,000 years, the random event may well fall into an organized pattern, slowly unfolding over hundreds of years. But how much better if the long wait is bypassed and the very nature of the tree itself, its species, and its characteristics is studied? Okay, great. So I'm gonna put this in the chat. This is Bernadette Brady talking on the Saros cycle.
Yeah.
So I was
I'm not
close.
astroseek, and I have seen nothing referring to a Saros cycle, so I'm not really sure what to do with that one, but we'll find it.
We can check out this. This is I all I know is it's something that looks at like thousands of years, hundreds of years of time periods, and
Yeah.
it's confusing me. I love that when I put something in the chat, it shows up in all the places. Okay. Oh, Sarah's
Right.
pulling it up. Okay, we can wait. Do you have a moment to wait till we? This is
Yeah, I
riveting.
mean, Sarah said you can find it on Astro. Yes, pulling it up. Cool.
Okay, so
Yeah, 'cause
I wonder if
Astro
Sarah's.
doesn't give me a search function, so I can't just search Saros cycle, and I'm looking at moon phases and all kinds of stuff, but it's not. Eclipses, solar and lunar, maybe it'll be in there. Nope.
Bernadette Brady is so brilliant, but just like goes just
Goes so hard.
hard. Huh?
She goes so hard, yeah.
She goes so hard. It's like everything is it's like its own thing, like the fixed star thing and the like the calculations, it's overwhelming to me. And then the like
Mhm.
chunks, I'm just sorry. I'm not I hope I'm not offending anybody. I have utmost respect for it. My brain just can't handle. Okay, we're
It's
113.
113. I don't know what that means, but
Me
good.
neither. See, this is why we are honest. When we don't
Yep.
have answers, we own it.
There is so much to learn in astrology, and that is why I love it. And so eventually I will understand more about Saros cycles, but I'm just giddy about my comprehension of eclipse and condition of the year things, which I've been working on for almost a year now, and I'm finally starting to understand. So,
Woo! Also,
yeah.
Sarah says it's in the tab that says solar and lunar eclipses. There we
I
go.
tried that. I'm in solar and lunar eclipses. So I got somewhere there.
Okay.
Well, Sorrow cycle. Oh, I see. It just says Sorrow series and it says 113. But when I click on that, lunar eclipses is governed by the Sorrow cycle, period of approximately 18 years. When two eclipses are separated by a period of one Saros, they are very similar geometry. Two eclipses occur at the same time or at the same lunar node with the moon at nearly the same distance from the Earth at the same time of year. Thank you. Sorrow series returns to about the same geographic region every 3 Saroses, 54 years and 34 days. This 3 Saroses period is called an exeligmos, turning of the wheel. And that's all it tells me.
Okay.
I feel like I still don't know what that
we
is.
have the Bernadette Brady
Yeah.
PDF. We can go do our homework.
Yeah.
Love
Yeah.
it.
And we will. But thank you for giving me that little tutorial on AstroSeek, Sarah. And if you could, because I know you're one of my Patreons and stuff, can you send me that course that you did? And then I will share it with you, Vivi.
I love it. Yeah. Okay. With that, everyone have a gorgeous day. Follow us in all the places. You are Crystalline
I
Sophia.
am Crystalline Sophia everywhere. It is my name.
I am Vivi Henriette and Art of the Zodiac. I've just now made it confusing for people, but not really the same
That's
person.
fine.
Find me in all the places. Have a gorgeous day. Goodbye, friends.
Be safe.
Bye.